If you're listening to this, it's not an accident. I don't believe in coincidences anymore. Maybe you scrolled past 100 stories before this one, but this is the one you clicked, and maybe, just maybe, it's because God wanted you to hear it. My name is Daniel Caney. I'm 45 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had life figured out. A wife who loved me. 4 kids who needed me. A business I built with my bare hands. For 22 years, I believed in what we had. Sandra and I. I believed in us the way I believed in God's promises. Through every storm, through every sleepless night, through every prayer whispered over our children's beds. We were supposed to be unshakable. That's what I told myself. That's what I thought faith looked like, holding on, even when life tried to tear you apart. But then I saw the truth. And the truth, it didn't just break me. It made me question everything I ever believed about love, marriage, and even God himself. It started on a Tuesday. Funny how life can change in a day you barely notice, just an ordinary Tuesday. I'd just gotten back from Traverse City after closing a renovation deal. I was early for once. The house was quiet, too quiet. Sandra's car was in the driveway, but it felt empty. I found her in the office, sitting in front of her laptop like the world outside didn't exist. Her shoulders stiffened when I touched her, like I was a stranger. Then she slammed the laptop, shut so hard I thought the screen would crack. "God, Daniel, you scared me," she said, her hand pressed to her chest. I tried to smile to keep it light. "What are you working on?" "Just some scheduling stuff for the office," she said. Wouldn't meet my eyes. Claimed Dr. Peterson was reorganizing appointments. It sounded normal enough except for the way her voice trembled. Except for the way she avoided me, like my love had become a question she didn't want to answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe, asking God what was happening to us. "Lord, if there's something I'm not seeing, show me. Please, show me the truth. Be careful what you pray for. Sometimes God answers, and you're not ready for the weight of it." The next morning, Sandra was gone before sunrise. No coffee waiting for me, no note, just the cold side of the bed. I dropped Henry off at school and drove straight to the dental office. I didn't plan on confronting anyone. I needed reassurance. Needed to know the woman I loved wasn't lying to me. Betty, the receptionist, greeted me with that warm, grandmotherly smile. "Daniel Kane, what a nice surprise. You here for Sandra?" "Actually," I said, trying to sound casual, "I was hoping to schedule a cleaning. She mentioned you've been busy updating your computer system." Betty blinked, confused. "New system? Oh, no. We've been using the same software for 3 years now. Works just fine." My chest tightened. "Maybe I misunderstood," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might shatter. Betty went on like nothing was wrong. "Sandra usually leaves right at 5. Dr. Peterson likes us to keep regular hours. Only person who stays late is Monica. And that's just Thursdays." I thanked her and walked back to my truck. But inside I was breaking. The truth was whispering now, and it sounded nothing like the vows we made in front of God 22 years ago. That night I asked her straight out, "Sandra, is everything okay between us?" She didn't even pause, brushing her teeth. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I swallowed hard. "We don't talk anymore. You're working late. I'm busy. We're ships passing in the night." She rinsed, faced me, and sighed. "Daniel, we've been married 22 years. We have kids, a mortgage, a business. This is what real life looks like. We can't be newlyweds forever." "I'm not asking for that," I said softly. "I'm just asking for honesty." Her eyes hardened just a little. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I lied. "Forget it." But I couldn't forget. and I had a feeling God wasn't going to let me. 2 days later, he gave me the answer. Sandra went grocery shopping. And for the first time, she left her laptop on the counter, careless. Or maybe God just opened a door. I didn't want to open it. I swear I didn't. But my hands, they had a will of their own. When I read those emails, my soul cracked in half. Words like knives. Last night was incredible. I can't wait to see you again. I love you. I stared at the screen and my knees almost gave out. 6 months. 6 months of betrayal while I was praying for us, fighting for us. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But instead, I whispered the only words I could manage. God. Why? And in that silence, I swear I felt him say, because you needed the truth. That night, as Sandra slept, I packed my bags in silence. 1 shirt, 1 pair of boots, my Bible, and as I zipped the last bag, I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. I didn't look back when I closed the front door. Couldn't. If I saw her face, even in sleep, I might lose the courage God had given me. The night air hit like a slap, cold and sharp, smelling of pine and rain. My duffel bag thumped against my thigh as I walked to the truck. Every step felt like a confession. You're leaving your home, your kids, everything you built. But I wasn't the one who broke it. That thought kept me breathing. That thought, and the Bible tucked in my bag. The engine roared to life and I drove. Past the gas station where Sandra and I used to buy ice cream on summer nights. Past the church where I said I do in front of God and everyone we loved. Past the life I thought I understood. I didn't know where I was going. Just away. Away from lies. Away from the sound of her voice saying, "You're overreacting," when all I'd done was ask for honesty. 2 hours later, I pulled into an empty motel parking lot, the kind with flickering neon signs and doors that looked like they'd seen better days. The clerk didn't ask questions, just slid me a key like he knew I wasn't there for a vacation. Inside the room, everything smelled of bleach and loneliness. A single bed, a chair, a lamp with a crooked shade. I dropped my bag and sat on the edge of the mattress, head in my hands. For 22 years, that woman was my home. Now home was a box with peeling wallpaper. I opened the Bible, hoping for something. Comfort, clarity, a reason. My fingers shook as I flipped to Psalms. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. I read it aloud, voice cracking. Then I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Close to the brokenhearted, huh? Then you must be sitting right here with me, God. Silence answered. But maybe silence was what I needed. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing in someone else's arms. I heard his name in her whisper. Colin. It burned like acid in my chest. By morning, I had a plan. Not revenge. Not yet. Just distance. I'd call the kids, tell them I had a work emergency. Give myself time to think. I checked my phone. 15 missed calls from Sandra, 4 voicemails, 2 texts. Where are you? Please call me. I deleted them without listening. Then, something caught my eye, an old contact I hadn't seen in years. Pastor Jim, the man who'd married us, who'd prayed over us when Ellie was born. I stared at his name like it held the answer. Finally, I hit call. He picked up on the second ring. Daniel? Son, it's been a long time. My throat tightened. Yeah, it has. You okay? I laughed, but it came out like a sob. Not even close, Pastor. Where are you? In a motel somewhere off Highway 31, wondering why God let my whole life blow up in my face. Tell me what happened, he said, calm as a man who's seen every kind of storm. So I told him. Every word tasted like blood, the lies, the late nights, the emails, the way she looked at me and said I was overreacting when she was planning a future with another man. Pastor Jim didn't interrupt. When I was done, he said something I didn't expect. Daniel, sometimes God lets things break so he can rebuild them stronger. But you've got to decide, what are you going to do with the pieces? I stared at the ceiling. I don't even know who I am without her. Yes, you do, he said gently. You're the man God made you to be before you ever met Sandra. That man is still in there. His words sank deep, but they didn't stop the ache. What about my kids? You be their father, he said. Not out of anger, out of love. That hasn't changed. We prayed then, right there over the phone, like two men trying to hold on to something holy in a world full of ruin. When, he said, Amen, I felt, not whole, but steady. Steady enough to face the next breath. I showered, dressed, and hit the road again. North this time. No destination, just movement. Until a green sign appeared, Harbor Ridge, scenic lookout. Something pulled me off the highway, maybe curiosity, maybe God. The lookout was empty except for one car and a woman leaning against it, staring at the horizon like she was trying to remember how to breathe. Her hair whipped in the wind, catching the sunrise in strands of fire. She didn't see me at first. When she did, her eyes widened, like she wasn't expecting company either. Beautiful, isn't it? She said, nodding toward the lake. Her voice was low, steady, but there was something in it, something that sounded like my own heartache. Yeah, I said, and for the first time in 24 hours, I actually meant it. We stood there in silence, two strangers on the edge of the world, watching the light break through the dark, and I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, God had me right where he wanted me. The wind off Lake Michigan tasted like salt and something else, freedom maybe, or fear. I stood there, hands in my jacket pockets, staring at water that seemed endless. The woman didn't move, just kept watching the horizon like it held an answer she'd been chasing for years. Her hair was a storm, auburn strands whipping across her face, catching the sunrise in streaks of fire. When she finally turned to me, her eyes were the color of old whiskey, warm but carrying shadows. You from around here? She asked. Her tone wasn't curious so much as cautious, like someone who had learned to expect goodbye more than hello. I shook my head. Just passing through. She nodded slowly. That makes two of us. Something in the way she said it made me want to ask 100 questions. But instead, I looked back at the lake, trying to breathe in its calm like medicine. After a long pause, she spoke again. You look like a man trying to outrun something. A humorless laugh slipped out before I could stop it. That obvious? She shrugged, a small smile ghosting her lips. Takes one to know one. I glanced at her car, Michigan plates, a few fast food wrappers on the dash, a kid's soccer ball in the back seat. You running from something too? Running to something, she corrected, eyes never leaving the horizon, or at least trying. The honesty in her voice made my chest ache. I wanted to say something, anything, but all that came out was, I used to think I had everything. Her gaze shifted to me then, sharp and searching. What changed? I swallowed hard. The words felt heavy, like they might sink if I didn't get them out fast enough. I found out the person I trusted most wasn't who I thought she was. She didn't gasp or look away, just nodded, like betrayal was a language she spoke fluently. I'm sorry, she said softly, and for some reason it sounded like more than sympathy, like she knew the shape of that wound. We stood there in silence, two strangers bound by brokenness, while the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of gold. Finally, I said the thing I'd been choking on since yesterday. Do you ever ask God why? She blinked, surprised. Then she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Every day. What do you think he says? I asked, my voice rough. She turned fully toward me now, arms crossed against the chill. I think sometimes he's quiet because the answer wouldn't make sense yet. Not until we're ready. Her words hit like a whisper from heaven, and I hated that they made sense. Because right now, none of this did. I wanted to ask her name, but something stopped me. Maybe because knowing her name would make this real, and real felt dangerous. So instead, I said, "Thank you." For what? For not telling me it'll all be okay. For not lying. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the weight on my chest felt lighter. She checked her watch, exhaled. I should go. I wanted to tell her to stay, to keep standing there until the ache inside me quieted. But before I could speak, she opened her car door. As she slid behind the wheel, she hesitated, then leaned out and said, "For what it's worth, you're not alone, even when it feels like it." Then she drove away, taillights vanishing down the winding road. I stood there long after she was gone, the echo of her voice tangled with the sound of waves. You're not alone, but I felt alone. God felt far. And yet deep down, something stirred, a thought I couldn't shake. What if she was right? What if this wasn't the end, but the middle of something bigger? I didn't know her name. Didn't know if I'd ever see her again. But I knew this. She'd left a mark. A question I couldn't unask. What if God put her here for a reason? Back. In the truck, I gripped the steering wheel, staring at the empty road. For the first time since I walked out of my house, I didn't feel like I was running. I felt like I was being led, and I whispered a prayer I hadn't said in years. Lord, if there's a reason for all this, don't let me miss it. 3 days. That's how long it's been since I saw her. The woman at the edge of the world. I don't even know her name, but she's been in my head like a song I can't turn off. I told myself it was just a moment. 2 broken people standing in the same storm. That's all. But the truth? That silence with her felt more like home than the last year with Sandra. And that scares me. I've been staying in a cabin I found on a rental site, far from everything. Far from her, far from my kids, far from the life that feels like it belongs to someone else. I thought the isolation would help. It hasn't. At night, the memories creep in. Sandra's laughter in someone else's arms. Those words on her screen. Last night was incredible. And I asked God the same question over and over. Why me? But tonight I couldn't sit in that silence any longer. I needed air. Needed to drive. And somehow, without meaning to, I ended up back at Harbor Ridge. The sky was painted in bruised colors. Purple. Gray, fading gold. The lake was restless, waves crashing against the rocks like they were angry too. And then I saw it. Her car, parked in the same spot. My chest tightened, and for a second I almost turned around, almost drove away and kept my ghosts to myself. But then she stepped out. Same auburn hair, only now it was braided loosely over one shoulder. A navy sweater that looked too big for her frame. Sleeves swallowing her hands. She looked like a question. I didn't know how to answer. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Then slowly, she smiled. You again? I managed a nod, though my throat felt tight. Guess we've both got the same idea. She tilted her head toward the horizon. Running. From life? I swallowed. Running to peace. She laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. Let me know if you find it. We stood there, side by side, watching the sky fall apart. For a long time, neither of us spoke. And then, Like the words had been clawing at her throat, she said, "My husband left me last year. For someone younger." I turned, startled. She shrugged like it was nothing, but her hands were fists inside her sleeves. "One day he just decided I wasn't enough anymore." Something cracked in my chest. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it in a way I'd never meant anything. She looked at me then, really looked, and I swear the wind stopped for a second. "What about you?" I hesitated. The words tasted bitter, but I forced them out. 22 years of marriage, 4 kids, and 6 months of lies I didn't see until it was too late. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but nothing came. So I kept talking, because if I didn't, I'd drown in the silence. She said, "I was overreacting." My voice shook. Overreacting to her building a future with another man? The rage surged again, hot and wild, and before I knew it, my hands were gripping the railing so tight my knuckles turned white. I gave her everything, every hour, every prayer, and she... My voice broke. I bowed my head. She burned it all down. The tears came before I could stop them, silent, furious tears that felt like acid on my skin. Then I felt it. A touch, light, barely there, but enough to make me freeze. Her hand, resting on mine. I didn't move, couldn't. My pulse roared in. My ears as her fingers curled slightly, not gripping, just staying, like an anchor in a storm. When I looked at her, there was no pity in her eyes, just understanding, a raw, aching mirror of my own pain. And God help me, I wanted to pull her into my arms, not for desire, for refuge, for something that felt like safe after months of drowning. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I whispered, "I don't even know your name." Her lips curved, sad and beautiful. Grace. Grace. Of course it was. Like God himself had a sense of irony. I let out a shaky breath, my forehead resting against the railing. "Grace," I whispered, tasting the word like a prayer. We stood. There, her hand on mine, the sun gone, the world washed in twilight. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel completely hollow. I didn't feel whole either. But maybe that's what grace is, light seeping through the cracks. When I finally pulled back, her eyes held mine. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. But as I walked back to my truck, I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the pain, it's been my shadow for months, but because of the word echoing in my head like a bell I couldn't unhear. Grace. Her name wasn't just a name. It was an answer I didn't know I'd been asking for. I drove home at sunrise, the road stretching like a confession I wasn't ready to make. My kids would be waking up soon. They still didn't know the truth, not fully. How do you tell your children that the person they trust most shattered the foundation beneath them? When I walked into the house, it smelled the same. Coffee brewing. Warm bread. For a second, I hated it. The illusion of normal. Sandra stood by the kitchen counter, hair tied back, wearing the robe I bought her for Christmas. Daniel. Her voice was soft, cautious, like she thought a fragile tone could glue broken glass. "We need to talk." I set my keys down slowly. "About which part? The lies? The man you swore was just a friend? Or the way you made me feel like I was crazy for seeing what was right in front of me?" Her lips trembled. I made a mistake. I laughed. A sound that didn't feel like mine. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is leaving the stove on. What you did?" I stepped closer and she flinched. "What you did was a choice." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry. Not anymore. "Daniel, please," she whispered. "Don't throw away 22 years. I stared at her, the woman I prayed for every night, the woman I built a life around, and all I could think was, She already did. I turned away before my rage turned me into someone I wouldn't recognize. My voice was low, steady. I'll call the lawyer today. I'll make sure the kids are okay, but you and I shook my head. We're done. Her sob broke the silence, but I didn't stop. I walked out the door like a man walking out of his own grave. The next week was a blur of paperwork, conversations with kids that ripped me open, and nights staring at the ceiling asking God why he let this happen. And then one evening, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, I found myself back at Harbor Ridge. She was there, sitting on the same bench, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding in pieces. When she saw me, her lips parted in surprise, then curved into the smallest, softest smile. "Daniel," she said, and my name on her lips felt like a balm. I sat down beside her, not too close, not too far, just enough. "Thought I might find you here," I murmured. She laughed lightly. "Or maybe God wanted you to." The words hung between us, heavy and holy, and for the first time in months, I felt something I thought I'd lost. Peace. We didn't talk about the past, not hers, not mine. We just sat there watching the water dance under the fading light. And then she said something that cracked me wide open. "You know, I used to ask God why my life fell apart." Her voice trembled. "Why the man I gave everything to decided I wasn't enough. And last night," she turned to me, eyes shining. "Last night I realized maybe he wasn't taking something away. Maybe he was giving me something I couldn't see yet." My throat tightened, because I knew what she meant. Maybe that's what grace really is. Not a word, not a name, but a gift. Something you don't earn, something you don't see coming, something that finds you when you're standing on the edge, ready to let go. I reached over, slow, careful, and took her hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers slid into mine like they'd been waiting for a long time. We just sat there. Two broken hearts, held together by something bigger than both of us. When I finally spoke, my voice was barely a whisper. "If you're hearing this, if you're listening to my story, maybe it's not an accident. Maybe God wanted you to. Because sometimes the ending you prayed against is the beginning he wrote for you." And as the sun sank behind the water, I realized something I never thought I'd feel again. Hope.